I'm just going to take a couple of moments and let people come in. So while we're waiting, why don't you just take a moment now and tell us how you're feeling right now about where your capacity is. Are you feeling at capacity? Are you feeling like you got tons of capacity? Just type it in the Q and or in the chat bar below. Let us see how you're doing. Just type one word, something that brings us to your world just for a moment. Just waiting for some more people to come in, and everyone's being a little shy. I guess no one really wants to talk about their capacity. I get it. I can tell you that I'm feeling probably a little stretched right now. We're going to hear from our expert in a little bit, but I think my work might be taking over a little bit of my full capacity chart. Okay, we're going to get started. Well, thank you all for coming. Good afternoon. I'm Andrea Sampson, the CEO of Talk Boutique and your host and moderator of today's Sense-Making Conversations. Thank you so much for joining us. Now, yesterday we had a special edition and we delved deeply into relationships, mental health, and entrepreneurship with our guest, Cherry Rose Tan. She showed us how these three concepts impact our perception of how much time we have and how they affect our perceptions of ourselves. Now, this was a great segue for today's conversation, where we'll talk about capacity and what it really means. Now, when I think of capacity, I think about how busy or not busy I am. But this isn't the only way to think about capacity. What about our capacity to learn new concepts, or our capacity to feel empathy in a situation, or our capacity to cope with challenging times? I know this is something we're all dealing with right now. And all of these concepts are impacted when our time is at its limits. Now, I'm often guilty of only thinking about capacity when I'm at or over it. Now, I wonder why that is. It could be some early conditioning and probably some deep psychology involved. But, you know, it doesn't change the fact that so many of us are looking for more capacity, more time to be able to manage the many demands of our lives. Our guest today is an expert in helping us to navigate capacity. In fact, she calls herself the Capacity Creator. Now, that's a label that I think I'd like to have. Melanie Sodka is an award-winning professor, author, podcaster, executive coach, and TEDx speaker. She's known for her ability to facilitate breakthroughs and transformations for her clients. She uses her unique capacity matrix to help her clients visualize the idea of capacity so they're able to make better decisions. Today, Melanie's going to take us through a self-diagnostic tool that will deconstruct the 4 states of capacity and how to ultimately optimize yours. Melanie will take us through some of her work for about 20 minutes. And then we're going to transition into a Q&A. So while Melanie is talking, don't be shy. Add your questions to the Q&A bar below. Also, add your comments because we're going to be moderating those all the way through. So Melanie, I'm really looking forward to this. Can you take us through that matrix that I know you have, but I'm curious about this background you've got with you right now. Melanie?
Thank you so much for that very eloquent introduction, Andrea. It's a pleasure to be here and speak to the community. So before I get into that matrix, you said yes to being here, and there are so many things and opportunities vying for your attention, and so that is why I chose that attention economy slide behind me. It's so busy. There are so many things happening right now, and we just want to thank you for tuning in. So the things that I want to do with you in our short time is I want to be able to share some knowledge with you. I also want to increase your self-awareness as it comes to your commitment habits and maybe your indulgent behaviors. And I also want to leave you with some suggested tools where you could optimize that capacity. Really, I just want to be in your back pocket so that you can pull out some of these tools at any given time to help you in any moment. So we will definitely get started here. I just wanted to share some slides with you in the meantime. So a couple of things. During this time together, you will be distracted for 8 minutes. And this is really out of the University of California, Irvine. And so I just want to make sure, Andrea, it says that it's muted. I just want to make sure you can hear me. Okay, fantastic. Great. So you will be distracted every 8 minutes during the time that we're together. And this is crazy because something, again, will be vying for your attention. But what's actually, which is a little bit more surprising, is that it will take you 15 minutes to get back to the place where you are, to get back in that productive zone. And this happens to us a lot. So really paying attention to where you are distracted and how frequently you are distracted. And if you're watching this from your phone or if you're watching this on your computer, I am able to bet, based on research, that you probably have an average of 9 windows or apps open at this time as well. And so it's just the way that humans have been operating and multitasking. And there's a slew of research in terms of multitasking, but that I will save for another day. Really, at the end of the day, distraction is spurred by the desire to really escape discomfort. That's what distraction is. And I'm reading a fascinating book called Indistractable, and there are a lot of great tidbits in there that really educate us on how this is one of our biggest capacity eroding offenders, is distraction. So a little bit of that as the background for you. So let's dig into capacity, shall we? And in order to help understand what capacity is like, I have a couple of quick stories and analogies to help you understand what that's like. So what do Jenga and capacity have in common? Well, I'm just going to share with you what that is. So picture yourself as, picture your capacity as this beautiful tower of, built of Jenga. And really what happens here is that every block is positioned and represents a healthy capacity. But as the game goes, most of you are familiar with this, every commitment, every yes, you start to take apart this tower. You start to remove a block. Yes, I'll do that project. Yes, I'll take on, an extra shift this weekend. Yes, I'll help a friend move. And before you know it, you have taken away so many blocks out of this tower that you're actually left with a wobbly tower, which represents an unsteady capacity. And so we have to be careful. Because taking out that wrong block, saying yes to yet another commitment will really create the toppling effect. You will be over capacity and you will definitely end up in a state of fatigue, which I'm going to share with you in just a moment. So really understanding a little bit more about what capacity and Jenga have in common. So just another quick story for you too, just to help put capacity in perspective. Robin Sharma is one of my favorite authors, and I did get to meet him recently. And he wrote a book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Now, in this book, there is a section that really hit home for me in terms of what capacity means. So very, very quickly, there are 2 lawyers, and one is this older, coveted lawyer. Like, if you need something done, you go to him, he gets the job done. He's successful, he's famous, he's wealthy. And then you have this young lawyer in his shadows, and he's really following in his footsteps. But this older lawyer hasn't taken care of himself. He's overcommitted. Again, he's not healthy. And one day, while in the courtroom, he drops. He doesn't die, but he has a severe heart attack. And so when he comes to, he decides, that's it, I'm done. I'm not handling this lifestyle anymore. And he hightails it off to the mountains to study the monks. He actually becomes a monk. So years go on, the young lawyer follows in his footsteps and ends up a prominent lawyer as well. The monk comes back and wants to meet with the young lawyer. And they find themselves in the young lawyer's beautiful home, luxurious tapestries and Persian rugs, and the monk is pouring tea. And as he pours the tea, he continues to tell his stories, and before you know it, the tea has spilt all over this like very expensive rug. And the young lawyer is like, whoa, are you mad? What's happening? And the monk says to him, just like this cup is overflowing, you too are overflowing with your own ideas. And how could you possibly put any more in without pouring some out first? And that's exactly what this is about, is capacity is finite. And we have to be careful as to what we really commit to. So keeping those things in mind, I really want you to understand where we're going to go with this, and I'm going to introduce you to that matrix in just a second. But first, let's take a look at the three key components that make up our capacity. Capacity is about time. There is a time element, but that is not the major part of what creates a healthy capacity. There are actually three parts to this. You need energy, you need passion, and you need fulfillment. And these three need to work together, because if you're missing one, you are likely to run into some issues. You're likely to be potentially chasing misdirected outcomes. Maybe you are deprioritizing self-care. And so really understanding that these three have to work together in order to sustain a healthy capacity. So let me introduce you to the matrix, shall I? The matrix is something that definitely was created out of a state of burnout. And it was something that I had created because I was observing people, and I was really trying to understand my own state of capacity. And so what happens here is that on the y-axis you have opportunity. Never before have we been presented with so many options and so many opportunities really to commit to new things. And we also have capacity on the x-axis. So if we start out with the top quadrant called indulgent, this is where opportunity is bountiful. It's where we say yes a lot. It's a state where there's a lot of adrenaline and almost that addiction to adrenaline, because we love to commit to new things. We love to please people. We love to say yes. And so it's a place that, when used responsibly, can definitely help us, but can also get us into a lot of trouble. And so if we do get into that trouble, we end up in this bottom place called fatigue, which is burnout. And I'm going to talk about that in just a couple minutes. Burnout is not a place where we want to be. We want to reemerge in reserved, the third state of capacity, where we can actually say yes to things responsibly. It's where we can actually sink into our hobbies. It's where we can actually restore our capacity so we don't end up in that burnout state. And maximized is where we want to spend most of our time. It is a place where we say yes with discernment and no without guilt. It's where we're on fire. It's where we're respecting our capacity the most. So a little bit around that, I mean, it's such a good self-diagnostic tool that has been helpful with a lot of clients. Now, you can actually access this on the website and take a quick assessment if you wanted to do either a self-diagnostic or if you actually want to go take the assessment and get the results. So you can understand how you're allocating that capacity. All right, so I'm just going to share this here. There we go, perfect. So again, quickly, if we go through indulgent, our bodies are, it's like a race car. We have the capacity to accelerate and to go at like neck-breaking paces, but this is not what we choose to do all the time. We have to really savor that. Fatigued is too often we come home looking like this, and this is not where we want to be. We do not want to be in this state where the family needs us, wants us, and we can't be our best selves. So we really have to manage that. Reserved is all about really respecting and restoring ourselves, hobbies, social, taking care of our emotional capacity. And maximized, again, is like you're on top of the world. This is definitely where we want to be spending most of our time. Now, If I just transitioned into current reality, this might look like some people's current realities, whether you have fur babies, whether you have teenagers, it doesn't matter how old these living beings are around you. We are pretty much currently in a pandemic that has us self-isolating and working from home. And, you know, Andrea mentioned this in her introduction, and I think we really need to pay attention to this because pressure to be productive all the time under these circumstances can destroy us. But empathy can restore us. And that's where we need to really pay attention, is that empathy part. And I'm going to provide some tools that will help with this and help manage our careers, our home lives, our relationships, because this is part of our capacity. This is how we take care of ourselves here. This whole coveted working from home notion that we so desired to help give us work-life balance is now one of the main culprits for burnout, for depression, for anxiety. There's a lot of that we have not managed to learn how to balance because it's been such a short, condensed period of time where most of the world was not ready to transition to this state. So it's been an interesting experiment, if you will, to see what will happen as we reemerge into a new reality. But this has taken a toll on our capacity for sure. And as I think about teams and working with teams in this work that I do, I wanted to bring this to your attention because what happens here is that when we get the collective results of where individuals on a team are operating out of, so which state might they be operating out of, versus the leader, this really paints an amazing picture of why a team might be running the way they are. So for example, when you look at this, these results of capacity for a team, you can see that the team is running out of fatigued mainly. They're exhausted. And this is representative from a company that I worked with where the leader was running out of maximized. So when you have someone running out of maximized as a leader and a team running out of fatigue, there's definitely an imbalance that needs to be addressed. So again, this tool helps people understand why is that? Where are these circumstances coming from? What is creating the dissonance that we can definitely address? So it's an interesting, really opportunity and exercise to do with teams. So as we transition, I wanted just to stress that working from home right now, plus self-isolation, definitely creates problems. This whole self-isolation is been interesting to study because we have known for decades that prisoners, for example, who are in self-isolation, we know that that is harmful, yet this is that we're working in right now. So really paying attention to that and how that can affect our capacity. So burnout, I mean, the World Health Organization has definitely deemed this as a health condition, or has recognized it as a possible health condition. So we need to understand what that might look like. Now, whether we're in a pandemic or not, here are the 5 reasons that are mainly responsible for burnout. So take a quick inventory to see possibly what might be happening on your team or with yourself personally. So perhaps unfair treatment at work, unmanageable workload, lack of role clarity, lack of communication and support from your manager, or unreasonable time pressure. And a lot of the times the burnout isn't the person, it's the actual culture or the team. So really honing in on where is this coming from. And there's so many articles and there's so much research on here. It's quite fascinating as we get into different expectations, different work conditions, how this really starts to erode quite quickly a person's capacity, a team's capacity. I mean, when we take a look at success, success is definitely, we think, people think our success is, overnight success, and it's been a very clear trajectory and oh, wow, you're doing so well. This is amazing. You're performing, you're high capacity, but really we know what success looks like. It is messy, and it has been a difficult road to get there, and the pressures are real. And so this burnout piece really makes me think of some research. I was just talking to a lawyer last week, and this lawyer is early 40s, and he's been doing this as his main career. And he says, Melanie, I'm in my 3rd diagnosis of burnout. And my doctor has said that for every diagnosis of burnout, you require 1 month to restore your health. So he said, I'm on my 3rd one, but I'm only on my 1st month of recovery. So I have 2 more months to find to recover. So this has been really interesting to study on how we recover, but we want to avoid all of this, right? We need to avoid that. So right now I want to do a quick exercise with you. And this is done in my live events. And so I have these capacity bracelets. They're these little silicone bracelets that I have. And what we do with them is we really imagine this to be our capacity. And obviously this band has elasticity to it. Our capacity has elasticity to it. It's about how far we stretch it and how we come back to a manageable situation. So if I were to, ask you a whole bunch of questions and you were to say yes to every single one, like, can you help me move? Sure. Can you take on an extra project? Sure. By the end of those 5 commitments, your fingers would be trembling and it's difficult to maintain this pressure. And that's exactly what capacity is. And if you can notice, my face is a bit distorted because this is how people walk around. People walk around tense and stressed and stretched, and they're just about to snap. And so we want to make sure that we start to evaluate and we start to see and to feel when are we getting to that point? How much are we actually stretching our capacity to the point that it is going to affect our health? So an interesting exercise that people end up feeling what this feels like in a visceral way. So just a quick exercise there for you. So let's go to tools. I want to introduce to you 2 tools of many that definitely help a lot of my clients in terms of respecting the capacity, evaluating where they're at. And one of them is, are you the CCO? You're like, what is a CCO? It's the Chief Capacity Officer. So are you the chief of your capacity? And so this acronym definitely helps us audit the different facets of our life. And, are we actually taking care of this? Are we nurturing these areas of our lives in a good way? Now, I've gone and broken the rules because I added an extra F, because fun definitely needs to be in here. And that's one that we're also going to evaluate. So just quickly, we're going to go into this. So in terms of career, here's some questions, some quick audit questions that you can ask yourself. Again, pandemic, non-pandemic, this just applies to your life. Revisiting goals and objectives. If we do talk about current times, are these goals and objectives still attainable? Given work conditions, given the transitions we've all had to make, relooking at these goals is imperative to making sure that we can stay on track realistically, or do we need to make some adjustments? And checking in with your manager or some of your employees to discuss these expectations and results is key to have these really productive conversations. And evaluate what new skills you need to keep building and to keep growing and to keep your professional development thriving. Really keeping an eye on that is going to be critical to nurturing that career part. H for health. Assessing levels of daily physical activity. I'm not going to labor on about this because God knows we feel enough guilt about the exercise that we don't get. But there's a lot of great resources and tools out there to help you get to those physical goals. Evaluating meal, snack habits, and nutrient consumption. Another piece of keeping our capacity intact. What are you feeding your body? What are you putting in fuel? Looking for an accountability buddy here too is definitely helpful in terms of health. If we go to intellectual, the I, this is a big one. It's a big one in terms of consumption of media, consumption of literacy, consumption of knowledge. And there's some productive consumption, and there could be some, not so productive consumption that we need to really pay attention to. So what books are you reading right now? What blogs are you reading? How much news are you consuming? I know that I had an individual in one of my seminars, and he was actually a social worker. And he stood up and he had this revelation, and he said, oh my gosh, because we were doing a distraction audit. He was watching the news in the morning. listening to it in the car on the way to work, putting it on in the background on his computer once he got to work, listening to it on his way home and before bed, and he was riddled with anxiety and he couldn't figure out why. And so what is it that we're feeding this big, beautiful brain sitting on top of our shoulders, and how are we nurturing that? And so really paying attention to that is definitely important. The emotional piece, really taking note of the emotional states. What are your triggers? I talked about distraction, and there's the 3 T's formula that I also share in terms of trigger, task, and temperament, and how does distraction really mess around with our temperament, and what tasks are we really more susceptible to being distracted in? How often are you connecting with friends and family? This is a big one to really take care of our emotional capacity. And they do say, that you are the best of the 5 people you surround yourself with, and really paying attention to who are you speaking to? Are they toxic? Are they actually good for your soul? And what activities are restorative for you? This is the really, really important to take note of. Financial, the F, revisiting financial goals and objectives frequently. I can't stress enough how these are all independent to each other. One will affect the other. Your intellectual will affect your emotional will affect your financial will affect potentially your career. So understanding that they all play together and they're all important pieces of a puzzle that need to really stick together. What needs to be adjusted in your financial plan, and celebrating small wins, for sure. Lastly, let's talk a little bit about fun. What are your favorite activities, that bring you joy? Assess your participation frequency in these things. Is it just that you do this, once a year? Do you do this often? Should you be doing it more often? Who makes you laugh? I know that getting on a Zoom call with friends with a glass of wine or a cup of coffee or tea is not the same as being live. But I've forced myself to do this, and I'm thankful, because then you get these belly laughs. This is really part of the fun. This is part of getting those endorphins going. Laughing makes you healthy, and that's proven in science and research. So really an audit, we did a very quick audit there, where this is one tool that helps clients really start to unlock the potential to see where it is that we can optimize. The second tool, I'm not going to speak a lot about, but this is a structure that I came up with called Ego Cake. And it is really about deconstructing each of these layers to better understand our commitment patterns and our indulgent behaviors. Really starting from the bottom layer and working your way up. It is a powerful tool. Just quickly, in terms of options, again, we are full of options, and options in abundance ends up stagnating us. We just become immobilized when there are too many options. So really understanding how to control temptation, how to really control what options are going to serve us best. I talked about distraction. I spoke about distraction. Resignation is the middle layer, and it is the juiciest layer of this cake, because it actually allows people to say no to things that are not serving them anymore, which, physically, I have the benefit of watching people just breathe easier and let go of things in order to become more aware of what they really want, and then make those commitments. So this is a very powerful tool, again, packed with research, statistics, and exercises at every level to really deconstruct some of these habits and bring this heightened self-awareness to our personal capacity. So with that, thank you so much. I tried to put this together for you in a comprehensive way so that you can take some tools back with you, and I'm trusting that this has served you. Thank you.
Wow, wow, wow. That was incredible, Melanie. Thank you so much. Now, you just took us through a whole lot of stuff. I'm going to, first of all, remind people, put your questions below, because I'm sure you have them. Holy cow, that was really helpful. I will say that, just understanding how we can look at capacity in a new way. Because I think we tend to think about it as like, okay, yeah, that cup is full and no more. But in terms of creating, and I love the idea that, it's flexible. And so we have to understand where we are in our own capacity and where that flexibility is. And so there's a couple of things that you said that I want to dig a little deeper into. First is like, where should we start? So how do we assess our own capacity? Like, how do I do that right now? Because I think I might be too far on one side, but I'm not sure. So tell me a little bit about that.
Of course. I'm so glad you asked, because really what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start from scratch here, because I was playing around with some stuff. I love whiteboarding. So as a professor and as a coach and consultant, I love getting on the whiteboard with my clients, whether we're live or we're virtual. So I love this tool. So if you picture this, Andrea, as your capacity, okay? So you have to play in the lines. We cannot go outside of the lines, because that is called capacity creep. And my husband can tell you a lot about that, because, I sometimes push my capacity over to him so I can have more, but a different story. What I love to get people to do is start looking at the different life buckets. And as we saw, we use chief, and that's some good thought starters. What's maybe not included in there is spirituality or social, or maybe there's a second job or hobby. So what I get people to do is I start to get them to really delineate, where they allocate this capacity. So if it's career, okay, so this is going to take up the career. Perhaps if, there's some family time and commitments, this is where family goes. Perhaps if there's a big social life, it's over here. Maybe spirituality. And sometimes, often actually, health ends up having this little piece of the cake, because it ends up being deprioritized for a lot of people. And what I find powerful, Andrea, about this exercise is that we don't look at our capacity this way. We're so used to evaluating our capacity in terms of time. So we look at a calendar. We look at what we're doing tomorrow. We look at, the clock. We look at meetings, but we really don't slice and dice it this way. And it paints a pretty good picture for people to understand.
So I just want to make sure I'm getting this right, because I think maybe I had a different understanding of capacity. I was thinking I had capacity in work and capacity in home and and you're telling me that really it's an additive thing. They're all coming to, so that if I go overextend in one, I'm taking from another.
Correct.
Then now I'm really getting your Jenga example earlier. So I think that's really helpful. And I think so many of us are sort of in that boat of being overextended in so many different places. So yeah, we've got the creep happening on either side of that whiteboard, which, by the way, really cool. Love that tool.
Thank you.
Catherine, who's listening in, had a question, and she said, what's the ideal split between the quadrants? This is I love this. So where should we be?
Yes, great question. Thank you, Catherine, for chiming in. So where I have focused, so over 2,000 people have taken this assessment so far, and not including my own observations, but clearly we want to stay out of fatigued. Fatigued is not somewhere where we want to go. Fatigue should be an indication that we're doing too much and we got to hop out of there quickly. But the good split would be between 50 and 60% in maximized, 20% indulgent, 20% reserved. And I'll tell you why, Catherine, because we need to access indulgent in a responsible way. And, really spending time in that indulgent state of capacity allows us to take some risks, allows us to have those stretch goals, allows us to, really access that adrenaline that we need to produce. I know that, I produce really well under pressure. And that's really a part of where that is. So I definitely will go into indulgent to access that, but in a responsible way. Restorative is equally as important to access, because that's what keeps us balanced. That's what keeps us healthy, and our minds, our bodies, our spirits, just really nurturing that part so we can optimize our capacity and really live in that state of maximized.
Thank you. That's it's helpful for me. I as I'm on many Zoom calls these days, and I think everybody is appreciating this. We're getting to know each other's lives better than we ever could have. I mean, we've all had meetings where the children have joined, or usually I have a cat in my arms. And we're double dutying. And so, if capacity is additive, and now we're in a place where home and work are the same, and we're doing more, there's, I think, a few people who are probably in that fatigued category already.
For
And
sure.
so what do they do? How do you get yourself out of that so that you can find your place of maximized, or maybe even, God forbid, indulgent?
Yes. Yeah, it's a great question. It's interesting how our boundaries are now blurred. Like, we just don't have any boundaries, in terms of workspace and where that is. So there are some different ways that we can do that. Again, reassessing our goals, like I mentioned, in terms of even setting up the day. Like, what is it that we need to accomplish? Setting up that schedule. I know here I have my husband's online, I'm online, the kids are online, but every day, starting with who is doing what, where are you, what do you need to get done, and really planning that day that way and setting those expectations, I think it is important. And then making sure that people have their responsibilities around the household too, to keep people accountable for keeping the household going. Again, frequent check-ins with your teams, with your bosses, to make sure that expectations are mutual and are mutually understood. And I think be kind to yourself. I mean, we're in a pandemic. And we're starting, we need to keep going, and we do, but we need to be kinder to ourselves. We need to prioritize health more than ever, because when we reemerge from this into this new state, whatever that's going to look like, I am fearful that there is going to be a lot of people needing some extra help
Yeah.
with their mental wellness. So being proactive with that now is going to be key to being able to maintain this capacity when we enter into the next stage of this.
Right. I think what I'm hearing is, so right now, because even though we might be double dutying at home with, blurring of the lines, we still have the opportunity to find the time for ourselves. And one of the things that you mentioned, and I want to dig a little deeper, is this concept of accountability. Often accountability has got a bit of a bad rap, in that it's like, oh, look, somebody caught me doing what I shouldn't be doing, or maybe, right, somebody's going to call me out on the fact that I didn't get that thing done. But I think in terms of capacity, accountability has a big role, because it's not a bad thing. It's actually a good thing. It's accountability for things like taking the breaks, or doing the things that are self-care. So talk a little bit about how that accountability and capacity could kind of coexist, and what they look like together.
Yeah, it is a great question. And there's a lot of self-discipline in this piece that is not a sexy topic, Andrea. No one wants to talk about self-discipline, because that's the tough work, right? And so again, there are different tools where people could help. I mean, there's two right off the bat that I can share with the listeners at this point. So number one is, accountability to yourself, accountability to what you are capable of doing, and how to manage that. We have a script that I've created for people on how to say no, I'm sorry, I just don't have the capacity for that right now. And so whether that's a boss, whether that's a family member, whether that's just another, obligation coming your way, how do you handle that? And how do you stay accountable to really your own mental health and your cap on capacity? And the other one is really looking at, like, paring this down. It's a 3x3 framework. If you look at the 3 most important roles that you play in your life. Okay, I feel a whiteboard coming on, so bear with me. That's going to be important. Okay. So if we look at the 3 most important roles in our life, where are you, whiteboard? There you are. Okay, so let me just erase this, and I'll draw that out for you. So 3 roles: The people that love straight lines are not going to love me after this, but you're going to have to bear with me. And so I'm going to scrap this. It's not going to work. I'm just going to talk to it. Forget it. 3 roles. And then from those 3 roles, I want you to start to establish what are the 3 goals. So a goal for each of those roles. And then what are the actionables, right? What are the deliverables? What are the things that you really need to do to really honor those goals that are going to make those roles come to life? And so that helps just really put that into an accountability framework for you.
So let's bring that one to life, because I think it's helpful to see it. So, so maybe my 3 roles are being a mom, being a leader of my team, and being a leader of myself. Maybe those are my three roles. So what are my goals? Well, I want to be effective as a parent and as a effectively parent my child. I want to make sure that my team has their goals and is able to do the work they need without me. And then in myself, I want to make sure that I am taking care of my physical health so that I'm able to be better, sleep better, feel better. So then maybe those are my goals. So now that I've got my roles and my goals, now what?
So now it's how are you going to make that happen? So in order to have your team operate effectively, what is that actionable? What is the thing that you're going to put into place to make sure that that goal manifests itself, that you really make that goal come to life? So whether that is daily team meetings, whether those are accountability check-ins, these are things that you can actually say that you've done in order to really have those goals come to life, that you're honoring that role that is extremely important to you. Okay. So as a spouse, as a parent, as a professional, those would be the 3. As a spouse, we talk about this a lot with some clients. We get into some personal stuff. Date night is hugely important because the role as spouse, the goal is improved communication, because when we're running 2 lives, communication falls apart, but we need date night to be able to communicate without interruptions, to talk about our life goals together, to talk about the future, to talk about what's happening, to keep those lines of communication open. Without those date nights, whether they're at home playing a game, whether they're out, that's not going to happen. As a mother raising, socially responsible children, what does that mean? That means having discussions with them. That means volunteering. So these are the things that keep me accountable to really preserving the capacity of those 3 roles that are the most important to me in my life.
Melanie, this has been absolutely delightful and helpful. We are almost at time. So first of all, I want to say thank you so much for helping us all to understand capacity and how we can actually manage that capacity so that we're effective not only for the people in our lives, but for ourselves. And I think that's a really, really important distinction. So thank you. And for anyone who's been listening, who's interested in Melanie for virtual speaking engagements, she is available. And I know, Melanie, you have many tools and workshops. So I know you're happy to share some of those. So thank you again for working with us today. So next week, we've got a great week lined up for you. On Tuesday, we're bringing Melanie Parrish back. She was with us last week for our sense-making conversation. Melanie, if you recall, Melanie Parrish is the experimental leader, and she helped us to see the different ways in which we can experiment as leaders so we don't fall into those destructive default leadership styles that take us away from who we are. And then on Thursday, we have Stephen Paleos, who is going to show us that working remote and inclusivity are synonymous. And then on Friday, we're back in for our sense-making conversations, and we're bringing Anne Connolly back. Now, Anne joined us earlier this week. She's an expert in decentralization and blockchain, and she's going to delve deeper into what decentralization and blockchain technology can help us be and do in a post-COVID world. It has been an incredible week, and I want to thank you all for joining us for today's intelligent conversations, and I hope that they have helped you make some sense of our world. I'm Andrea Sampson. This has been Sense Making Conversations, and stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected, and go out and have some intelligent conversations.